Hey everyone, it's me, HawkeyeG, and today I'm here with the top 5 quick tips video. I'm going to give out some pointers that I've learned over the course of my few Kislev campaigns, the sort of things you might not notice right away or might want to learn before starting your first run. These are small and simple pieces of advice, but they can make a big difference in your campaigns. And of course, with all the new mechanics this game has to offer, there's a lot to learn for each race, right? So if you are enjoying the videos that I make, please remember to like and subscribe. It does really help the channel grow. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. I'm happy to engage with anyone who wants to know more. Now, with that being said, let's get into the tips. So, tip number 1. Markets make more than farms. At pretty much all stages and in all situations, okay? This might be deceptive to some people out there, right? At first glance, you would think, well, maybe I can use the forest building to boost farms. After all, it says income from farms plus 50% in the local region. However, that only applies to the specific settlement zone, right? So if we look at Kislev with the forest, this farm, you can see it generates 184 income from the 85% bonus. But in Igorov, where there's no forest, we only get 128 income. Now, the market, even without that bonus, still gets 241 income. So you're always going to get more from a market in a settlement than you are from a farm. Additionally, the market is a building which can receive faction-wide bonuses from the market building chain in your major settlements, right? So you can see here we've got income from markets plus 5 faction-wide. There are some resource buildings which actually give income to farms faction-wide, but I believe there are also some that give bonuses to markets, and honestly, relying on this, it still isn't going to be enough, right? You're not going to get as much value out of the farms as you are out of the markets. I do still think there's some value to farms, though. If you do pair them up with the forest building, it's really good to put in a fringe settlement, right? Like if I had Novotrovsky, I'd want to put it there because the farm will give you a recruitment bonus or a recruitment cost reduction, right? And then the forest gives you casualty replenishment and ambush success chance. So I think it's still worth putting one of each in a settlement at whatever your fringe settlement is going to be to allow you to get better ambushes, recover faster, and recruit troops more easily. Now, the second tip of the game is that this religion building is a cornerstone of your gameplay. Now, I'm sure plenty of people figured this out early on, and probably anybody who's played through half or most of a campaign figured it out on the way through, but it really is worth repeating. It's a very critical and important building. Having even one of these at the start of your campaign, right? If the first or second settlement you take, you put one in there, that's a massive change, right? One supporter income that you would get at level 1 is infinitely more than 0 supporters per turn, which is what you start the game with, right? Having that passive income of supporters makes a big difference for the race and supporters early on, especially if you're not playing as Kostaltin, but regardless of who you're playing, it's useful to have. And then, of course, 2 supporters is twice as many as 1, and 3 supporters is only a 50% increase, but it's still pretty good, right? So getting a couple of religion buildings very early on in the game makes a big difference, right? Eventually, you want to end up with most settlements having a religious building, in part because of the devotion it gives as well, but also because it increases your Patriarch capacity. And of course, Patriarchs are a great hero to have, plus having a ton of heroes gives you the ability to close rifts more easily and just kind of have the spare hero capacity to just pull them out whenever you need them, right? You could also, of course, get that devotion from these. I don't think this is your primary means of getting devotion, but once you have enough of them, right, 24 per turn from buildings, that's pretty good. And that's enough to build or upgrade one of these per turn as well, right? So it can build a pretty stable, solid, passive income. I just think that it's easy to overlook the significance of your building in your first campaign or two. There's so many buildings to look at and so many things to learn that you might not realize it until you've already lost the first 2 tiers of supporters in the race. Now, the third tip that I have is going to be kind of strange, and it's don't make trade agreements with Cathay early on in the game. If I jump back in my campaign a little bit, I can kind of show you what I'm talking about and why, right? So you can see we're a little bit earlier on. We do have some trade routes with Cathay going, right? And with some dwarves as well. But if we try to make a trade with Zufbar, you can see they're not interested in it. And part of the reason why is I have too many trade partners. In fact, you can see that if I had fewer trade partners, I actually could get a trade deal with them. In the early game, you're going to have Cathay caravans coming through your territory, which means you will discover their factions quite easily, which means you'll be able to make trade agreements with them, and Cathay is usually pretty willing to trade with you. But the reason why you don't want to do that is because you want to make sure you save trade resources for the people near you, right? You've got all these Empire factions here and the Dwarf factions to the southeast, and you're much better off making friends with them early on than some randoms way off in the top corner of the map, right? So it's a small thing, and eventually you will probably have the trade resources and the diplomatic power to make trade deals with everybody, right? So I'm not saying don't make trade routes with Cathay ever. I'm just saying for the first 40 or 50 turns, you actually probably want to hold off on it, right? So you can keep your diplomacy penalty for that low, and that allows you to kind of negotiate, navigate the diplomacy with any of the Empire factions and Dwarves more easily. Like I said, to get your neighbors on your side and feel more secure in your home territory. Alright, jumping back ahead here a little bit for tip number 4, we're going to talk about Patriarch support skills. One thing I just wanted to touch on is the Patriarch special abilities. Since you get locked out of the other two when you pick one, it's something worth a little consideration and explanation, right? A major point to consider is that the healing ability has a limited number of uses, right? The melee attack and vigor bonus, they don't have a limited number, right? You can see here this says uses 3 on the ability description, but it doesn't say that for either of these two other abilities. So that's something to keep in mind when picking this. You would think that the heal is the obvious choice, but I think it's slightly less obvious, or at least better balanced because of this, right? In fact, I'd actually personally recommend the Vigor bonus. It's the one I wanted to specifically mention for this tip. It's because I initially found the description to be a little confusing. What does Vigor per second minus 100% mean? It almost sounds like that just reduces your Vigor to 0, right? With the way it's written, particularly the number value, it sounds like a reduction, not an increase. It's pretty vague, right? Why would I want to reduce my own Vigor? There's an implied word which is missing, which helps explain this much better. And that is vigor consumption per second minus 100, right? In essence, this ability cuts your vigor cost to 0 for its duration. This is an amazing ability for the ranged and melee hybrid units of Kislev, right? It means that while your armored Kossars are firing missiles at the enemy on the front line, those actions cost 0 stamina. So when the enemy front line hits your units and they're weakened, and they've been running to get to you, your armored Kossars are still at full stamina, right? And all of your Kossars in the back, which have been shooting their arrows the whole time, guess what? They have full stamina so that they can reposition more rapidly and will be more accurate in hitting their shots, right? I've been using it a lot personally, but the reality is that each of these abilities can be useful. They're all just situational. Depends on the kind of army composition you're going with and your playstyle, right? Melee attack is going to be better if you're trying to be more offensive with your armies. The heal obviously is good with a lot of heroes. It's also good if you're using like bear cavalry, right? Putting a Patriarch on a war bear, charging him in, and then having like one Patriarch with melee attack and one Patriarch with heals. That's going to be a devastating army composition. Now, I've saved the best tip for last, but this tip is to keep in mind your faction-specific hero action bonuses, right? I saved it for last because I think it's the easiest one to overlook with all the other stuff you have to figure out, but it's also one of the more important things for your campaign. So if we look at the hero action bonus you get for your faction, for the Ice Court, you get 10 devotion generated from successful Frost Maiden actions, and if we were playing as the Great Orthodoxy, we would get 10 supporters for every successful Patriarch action, right? These are some pretty serious bonuses, especially the one that the Great Orthodoxy gets, right? If we were playing the Great Orthodoxy, we would only need 5 successful Patriarch actions in order to hit this first tier, right? Theoretically, with things working out perfectly, within 5 or 6 turns, you could already have the first tier of this supporter, development complete, right? And it's only another 5 successful actions to get to the second tier. So Kostalton can very, very easily, as the player or as the AI, gain an upper hand through successful Patriarch actions. It'll also help offset the penalty you get for fighting Kislev factions at the start of the game as the Great Orthodoxy, right? Now, as for the Ice Court, what it should do is help you get more invocations completed on a regular basis, right? It'll kind of give you a little bit of extra income to either make sure that you always have an invocation active so you can generate supporters that way, right? Kind of an indirect way to generate supporters, right? Otherwise, you can also use it just to build more of your religion buildings to get that passive income of supporters early on, right? In order to build a religion building, it's going to cost you some amount of devotion, right? And so 30 doesn't sound like a lot, but that's only 3 hero actions, and it's going to make sure that you keep your devotion high enough, or at least allow you to balance it out to whatever level you'd like to be at, so that you do or don't get chaos incursions, or can keep making those buildings while activating invocations, so on and so forth. Right, so like I said, each of those bonuses can have significant impact on the course of the campaign, especially early on, so it's important not to overlook the value of map roaming agents in this game, but especially as playing Kislev, and with the ability to just recruit so many more heroes through either research or the religion building, it's very important to consider. With that being said, I believe that covers everything I wanted to for this video, right? Just some quick tips for people trying to get into Kislev. Like I said, small things you might overlook, but they're going to have a big impact on your campaign. Really simple to get into and understand, and like I said, there's just so much information that you have to try to digest in a campaign that I thought I would get these tips out there, and hopefully they help some people. Whether you're new to Kislev or you've tried a couple campaigns but you might be having a hard time, hopefully these tips helped you out. So, thank you so much for watching. Again, like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Any comments or thoughts or feedback, or if you have other questions about the game or Kislev, I'd love to see your comments in the description below. And other than that, have a nice day. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one.